we're going to kick this off. I know some people will be coming in here because they're checking out of their rooms.
I'm sure there's hundreds.
One announcement, if you're going, or if you want to volunteer member meeting, will be at lunch in this big meeting room. Not sure which one that one is, probably this one. Right here, okay, big meeting room, and they're supplying pizza. So that's at 12:30 to 1:30. All right, and I know these guys have been up before. Jeff Buchanan, Bob Horton, peer support, implementation, utilization, normalization. Get to run with these guys a little bit in the Western Fire Chiefs Circle. And I know they've done a presentation already, so I'm not going to take up your time. You guys can kick it off.
Cool, thanks. Appreciate that. It's great to be in front of all 7 of you again. It's the end of the conference, we get it, right? It is really cool for, I know Bob feels the same way, to be able to have an opportunity to present in front of you, no matter what the topic. So it doesn't matter if there's only 2 people or 200, we really enjoy this opportunity. Just a little bit more on the background for myself. Personally, I have a huge passion for this, and I know Bob does too. I don't know if anybody's gone to the EFO program. I did my first EFO paper on critical incident stress management and did a lot of my formal education in this area. I do believe that behavioral, psychological, and emotional health of not just firefighters, but first responders, police officers, our first responders, dispatchers. I think that this is the biggest problem that we're all facing. Not as much me anymore because I'm on the outside. For all of you that are inside, so it's a huge passion for me. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. Did you want to have me?
Sure, yeah, and we've done this talk at a number of different conferences, and sometimes it resonates well. You're going to hear some experience of our development of peer support programs in Southern Nevada at the time that Jeff and I were both in Las Vegas at different organizations. The scale is a little bit different, but we do definitely want to engage in some discussion. When I left Las Vegas in 2017 and came to Southern Oregon, it was a different experience. We were small fire departments, combination and volunteer fire departments. Not as easy to just spin up a peer support program in an organization in rural Oregon with 20 volunteers type of deal. So it was some uniqueness that I can also add as we go through parts of this presentation. For those that didn't see us before, I'm Bob Horton. I'm the Fire Chief, Jackson County Fire District 3. We're in Southern Oregon, Rural Fire Protection District just outside of Medford, 45 minutes from the California border, big wildland urban interface. Prior to that, I came from Las Vegas, Nevada, where I was born and raised, grew up in the fire department there. Jeff and I met in paramedic school back in the early 2000s. And then kind of grew up in the fire service together. And we both found ourselves in administration at the same time trying to solve a challenge we had in our industries, how we were supporting our folks, particularly when it came to mental behavioral wellness. And so we're going to go back to 2014 as we talk through this presentation and talk about how we worked together. He worked for Clark County Fire Department at the time. It's a neighboring jurisdiction to the city of Las Vegas where I had worked. And we were trying to solve this puzzle. I had just become assistant fire chief. I mean, literally the very first meeting as assistant fire chief. The fire chief in Las Vegas at the time says, we need someone to take on this project. Bob, sounds like it's good for you. I'm already overwhelmed. I'm trying to figure out what I'm actually, in fact, supposed to be doing. Anybody who's transitioned to that role understands where I'm coming from. And I now had the burden of trying to develop a model and a program to help support my friends and family that I had worked with for 14 years at that time. So let's go ahead and dive into it here.
There it is. That's it. We're a one-slide show here, gentlemen. That's how we're rocking it. And there's a reason why we did it this way. We try to supply a path. There's talking points on there. It's a little different. Hopefully, it's a little bit memorable. All those types of things make a play here. But this is what we're going to take you through, and we're just going to look at it. And definitely would love some input if you're willing to offer it. I don't know what you all are doing, if you're doing anything in your organization. So we definitely would enjoy some engagement and make it a little bit more robust if you're able to. But at the start of it all is, are you in denial? Most of us, and I think Bob would agree and like to hear from the group, when I got in the fire service, nobody was talking about it. Nobody was talking about it. And you'd go on some sort of jacked up call insert imagination here or insert your own reality here. And everybody's like, it's no big deal, right? No big deal. And you realize over time that it's just this thing that's nobody's talking about. Well, fast forward. Well, first of all, was that your experience too? It was no big deal, right? And when you really stop, when you put your just kind of reasonable person kind of hat on, is it normal to pull a kid out of a freaking wheel well or whatever it is, right? I mean, is it really normal? I think the answer is pretty emphatic. That's a big no. That is not normal for anybody to deal with. So fast forward, the military is doing a much better job of recognizing these sorts of traumatic incidents. And now in the fire service, we're doing a better job. But denial was a thing. What has been your experience, Bob, with denial in your career? Have you found that to be? Did you come in, was there denial?
Is the question denial of the need for help? Or,
That's right.
Yeah. I think we have moved the needle.
Yeah.
I think where we started, that was I think we all get that. The culture didn't really accept this acceptance. But 22 years in the service now, I think we have moved the needle quite a bit. I think we got work to do. We built this presentation and gave it, like I said, a number of times years ago, and I wondered if it was tired. I thought maybe as an industry we've moved past it, and I think in some places we have. But it was really loud and clear that the more we've given this talk, that there are still a lot of our folks kind of left behind in the behavioral wellness and peer support team concepts.
Yeah, copy that. And hopefully what we'll also provide is a couple of other perspectives from this vantage point. Some of you may have peer support, maybe all of you do, peer support teams that are ineffective. And they're ineffective because one of the reasons is because there's still barriers inside of the system, right? There are still people that may not think that it is a big deal that you run on these types of calls because it's part of the job. So, we're hoping that we can provide some recognition points too, that maybe you can make some further progress. But labor and management buy-in is one of the biggest pieces. Any union officials in the room? Okay, cool. What's your position, if you don't mind?
So I just stepped down from being president with my local.
Copy that.
So
Okay.
I've been on the e-board for 15 years.
Wow, okay, long time. And
Negotiator.
okay, all right, right on. All right. The truth of the matter is the entire organization needs you. Needs you to move the needle, needs your buy-in, because without it, nothing goes. So that's really one of the fundamental pieces from labor and management, is to have the leadership that's really seeing its importance. And Bob, I can only speak from my experience. I felt a tremendous amount of labor buy-in from Clark County and Las Vegas and in North Las Vegas. Was your experience the same at Las Vegas, and how has it been in your new role?
Yeah, in between the time that I took over the program or was asked to lead or launch this program as assistant fire chief, we used to have a critical incident stress administrator, was the job title, or critical incident administrator, crisis intervention administrator, thank you, in the organization. And when there was a housing bubble collapse, Las Vegas got hit really hard in 2007, the position got eliminated. So for 7 years at this point, there was no focused energy other than just the insurance, EAP program that was there to support folks. So we were really, starting back from ground zero. There was a lot of need, I guess, is the best way to put it, in the organization. A lot of stress, not just incident-related stress, but life-related stress. Again, we're coming out of a recession. People are losing their homes. Firefighters are losing their homes. Big financial challenges. The organization was hungry. So when we got to this stage of discussion of saying, well, what are we going to do? We're going to take some action on this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it because the fire chief did fund the position back in 2014. And that was one of my objectives under this program, was to bring somebody in. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on the game board. of what we got. So in terms of support from the bargaining group, that it was driven by the expectation of the fire chief was we want to drive this from the bargaining group. It wasn't exclusive to union members, but that obviously they represented the largest body of employees in the organization. It was we want them to drive it, and we want a program because anybody who's in management, you develop a program that isn't bought in by the workforce, they're simply not going to use it. So I was empowered and expected to get inside, and at that point I was 1 week removed from being in the bargaining unit myself. So I think from the chief's perspective, part of why he wanted me to do this is I was well supported by our folks and could do it that way.
Yeah, awesome.
I forgot to mention on the front, so I'm just going to kind of spoiler alert at the end. Our title is Implementation, Utilization, Normalization. What we're going to describe as we unpack this program got put to test in a way that I don't think any program could have ever been successful. And this was on the heels of the Route 91 music festival in Las Vegas, if you remember that. It's some kind of October 1st, just celebrated an anniversary of that. Jeff had a significant role in terms of the incident management of that event, but one of the components was the deployment of the resources that he and I had worked on for a number of years. So kind of later in the board, we're going to talk about what we learned from that, how the team performed, how it worked, and an event of that magnitude obviously is completely overwhelmed from Jump Street. But there was a program, and that's the kind of key takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get to this next piece, I do want to just, again, put a little teaser out there. Bob referred to that position as crisis administrator. And what I found out from hiring someone after that individual left, and his name's Jeff Dill. He runs an organization, a nonprofit called FBHA, which is Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, I believe is the name of it, and they track firefighter suicides and have been for 10 years. But there's a little bit of an off-putting feeling when it comes to referring to an individual in that way. And as silly as it sounds, we made that change as soon as he got in the organization, changed him from crisis, whatever it was, to behavioral health administrator, because people are more apt to go to someone if they don't have a crisis. It's just, names matter, right? It's just kind of this weird thing. And that's a great segue into the CISM versus peer support. Does anybody have a peer support team? Does anybody have a CISM team? Okay, all right, this is great, perfect. So in Clark County, for those of, and really let me just say, my personal opinion, for whatever it's worth, they're the same. This is a branding issue, okay? In Clark County, what happened was we're just getting this off the ground. We were going under the CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management, right? And we took the training through the ICISF. I don't know, did you all do that training? I see some heads nodding yes. But wait, you're not a CISM, you're not a Critical Incident Stress Management team. You're a peer support team, didn't you? Right?
We're both. Well,
right. But you see what I'm saying? Okay. All right. So hold that thought. So we went through this training, and the pushback from the floor, some very, very smart people, totally get it. We want to buy in. They're like, wait a second. You guys are coming off awful clinician-y, right? Oh, wait, we're not clinicians, right? We're just here for you. That's all this boils down to. But there is quite an upheaval of both professionals inside of the environment, professional, psychological, health professionals that really don't want firefighters in this area because it kind of dilutes what they do. But what we found is that there was tremendous pushback because they thought that firefighters were trying to be something that they're not. And so I'd like to kind of pause it here. And did you have any of those experiences with CISM? And what about out in the field here? For those of you that are using CISM, have you got any pushback from firefighters saying, whoa, what is this? Let's start with you, Bob. I
think, again, we're going back 8 years. Yeah, now at this point, about 8 years. We don't know a lot about how to do this. And we're trying to get to this point. I'm kind of moving down a little bit to like, well, who should be on peer? How do we even vet who should be on a peer support team? The culture of that organization at the time was, let's solicit interest. And, you got a captain's test coming up later this fall. I can assure you, you're going to get at least 30 of those hands are going to go up in the air. That was just normal. Like, I'm about to test for officer. I got to start volunteering to do things. 15 years into your career, you're now just starting to do things. But yeah, but that isn't who we wanted. Is that the right person? How do you find the right person? How do you define a peer, frankly, at that point? I mean, we really struggled with how to navigate that. Where we landed, and I'm sorry, I'm deviating from your question.
All good.
But the way we approached that, let me give you a little more time. One of the very first things that we had done after I was charged with this is we brought the workforce together in a workshop. A workshop that was hosted by some labor leaders that were part of this program. There were no chief officers that participated in the workshop. We knew that would be a barrier from people being open and honest. We kicked it off and said, this is what we want to have happen. Very open and honest. What do you need? What do we need? What types of programs are important to us? Do we want the Fire Strong website, which was popular out of the Phoenix, Arizona area at the time? You want that? Do we want a peer support team? Do we even want that? Do we want to fill the crisis intervention administrator position? And it didn't even occur to me at that time, what a stupid name, right? That really was, until we learned and developed and realized there was a framing effect to be had there. Do we want chaplains? Do we want therapy dogs? Do we want, right? Let's figure out where the priorities for the organization, for the workforce were going to be. And at the end of the day, we wanted all of it. The organization was hungry for something, some type of help. They felt like it's been helpless for a long time and that we're going to move the needle forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about how we proceeded to try to pursue the position. Let me just talk about it now. What did the organization look for? And we pushed a survey out to the workforce. And I think I was a little bit surprised. I came into it thinking that we were in the need of a clinician to drive this program. And what we heard back from the workforce on the survey, they were asked this question: what qualities would you like to see in the Critical Incident Stress Management Manager for LVFR? Rate in order of 1 to 5. 1 is most important, 5 was least important. And this is how it rated in terms of scoring. If you can't read that, it's approachability, experience, education, specific fire and EMS experience, and privacy and confidentiality. And overwhelming of the participants who participated in the survey, it was 248, which would be about half the members. It's pretty good for survey participation if you've done surveys. It was approachability and privacy and confidentiality. I just want somebody that I feel like I can go up and talk to, and that they're not going to tell my story to somebody else. Education, having a master's in family therapy or a doctorate in psychology or whatever was clearly the least of their interest. I really don't care what the person's credentials is. I need this. Right, and that was really powerful. And the person that we ended up hiring was out of the military. She had downrange experience in the military version of peer support. She had done an internship in a different program with Las Vegas Fire. She was in tune with the organization, with the needs of the dispatch center, which lives in the organization, and became an immediately accepted resource, which to you should seem unusual. It was unusual to me because in my mind, the message was, and I told her this, it's going to take you years to build relationships with these folks. They're just getting to know you. It'll take you years. So don't be put off by if people aren't open. That was not the experience at all. She came into the organization and was immediately accepted. And that was a signal to me to just how bad it was in terms of tension in the organization. So her hired. Next step for us was peer support team. And the way that we approached recruitment for the peer support team was another survey, pushed it out, and asked the workforce to nominate somebody. We approached it that way. Don't self-nominate. Nominate someone else. Who would you be willing to talk to? And we were able to compile a fairly short list of the very trusted allies in the organization that they, received a lot of votes, and when we approached them, you have been nominated as somebody that your peers would feel they would trust you. Are you willing to be part of this journey? And we tried to grow in as much diversity as we could. One of the areas we still struggle with are chief officers. Peer support for chief officers largely doesn't exist. Very difficult group to open up. Generally, chief officer's not going to go to a firefighter, and it's not any disrespect to them. It's just that the challenges and dilemmas chief officers go through are going to be different, and they need a peer. I'll put a pin in it there and come
Yeah,
back.
if we go back to the last slide, it's a great segue because, as we button up the CISM for peer support and dovetail into, actually go back to the last one if you wouldn't mind, Bob. Because I'm going to hit these kind of three and put us right into the little, right there. This is perfect. So part of what I said the dilemma was we thought we were being too clinician-y. So what we did is we did similar recruitment. It was about being inclusive, people from everywhere, street cred. We actually implemented retirees. And I know Las Vegas is using retirees as well now. Everybody's using retirees. I'm not trying to say, I don't know if Clark County was first, maybe Las Vegas was. But it is about that street cred. But here's what we had to do. We had to rebrand. We came in as a CISM. And people were fired up about it. Wait a second, this is a resource for the people, of the people, by the people, right? But they were upset about it. Okay, let's do a rebrand. So a little bit different perspective than what Bob did. They did a questionnaire, a survey, and they were getting information that way. We took our group and we did a focus group. And what I did is I led them through a strategic planning process. We did a mission, we did values, and we said, what's the vision? And we just rebranded as a peer support team. What was our mission? I'm not a long, wordy kind of mission guy. So I'm like, let's keep it under 5-6 words. And the mission was supporting our own. What were the main values? Trust and confidentiality, which was what Bob saw in his survey. What 3 things did you need in order to be a part of this team? It wasn't education. It wasn't being a chief officer or captain. Number 1, do you care? Are you willing to listen? And willing not to judge. And we rebranded. We went through that whole exercise, and we were able to kind of switch this negative reception of being a CISM team, and come back out as a peer support. But it was so crucial to do exactly what Bob said. Had we had people, and we talk about deployment here in just a couple of minutes, but it was important for us to rebrand. But you had to have the right people carrying the water. At the end of the day, and I guess I can get into it a little bit now, sorry, if you have a poor reputation of whatever it is, this is a difficult thing for you to do, to be a peer support guy or gal. Some of the most, and I know this is going to sound superficial, overgeneralizing, but the 2 key drivers of peer support in Clark County were 2 absolutely imposing dudes. One of them was a professional football player. Huge dude. The other one was a linebacker in college. And I know this sounds super superficial, but the reality is there's an amount of impact when someone like that has enough confidence and vulnerability and able to share, no. This is important. Sometimes the messenger matters. When you were going through that, Bob, after you did your recruitment in street credibility, did you find some of those aspects as well? That who the messenger was really important?
Yeah, agreed. And we were able to assemble probably about 10 or so folks at that stage, 700 employees in the organization, 10 peer support team members. This clearly wasn't the right math.
Right.
But we needed to start somewhere, and we had, right? And nobody knew what this was at this point. And we're going to get to SOPs and deployment, and I actually want to hear from the crowd a little bit before I get to that, because this was not easy to figure out. You know, we've got people. We need to figure out how to train them. We need to figure out what appropriate training is, and we'll unpack that in a minute. And then how do we use them? Because there's this, you know, and I don't know. You've got some expertise in this. Where the field is is it, should it be mandatory?
Yeah.
You know, CISMs.
Yeah.
Should it be voluntary? You got something?
Well, I got a question. So,
Yeah.
did both organizations like remove CISM out of it and go solely to peer support, or did you have both?
The entire Southern Nevada, I don't know exactly when Bob was there, but I can tell you right now, Southern Nevada, Henderson, North Las Vegas, Clark County are all operating under peer support.
So there's no CISM.
They don't talk about it, but the funny thing is behind the curtain, the little Wizard of Oz, your training really comes from the ICISF, which is Critical Incident Stress Management.
Well, and the deployment protocol does speak specifically to debriefings and diffusings and when does the team, you know, when is it appropriate to utilize the team? So the team is under the peer support moniker. However, they absolutely deploy as part of a critical incident team. Yeah, sir.
At Bozeman Fire, ours has been from the beginning, because we were fortunate to learn from others who
Yep.
experienced this stuff. Peer support, and then CISM is a component.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Cool.
feels appropriate. That
It's
seems
needed.
appropriate.
Yeah.
CISM's needed, it's a component,
Yep.
it's a tool.
It all comes, my personal opinion, all comes into, like I said, marketing, because the training behind the scenes is critical incident stress management, but it's how you deliver it to the men and women that are out there. My focus, anytime I talk about it, I soften, I don't use the words debriefings and defusings, I just stay away from it. Again, it's just about a thoughtful person sitting next to someone in their time of need and listening and trying to offer some offloading and trying to offer some direction in the right way to go when you're, you know, when what their needs are surpass what you can give them. Because sometimes all they want is an ear. So there's no right or wrong way, and you know, it's just one of those things I found through the experience that was really, really meaningful. But it had an impact just by changing the name. So thanks for the input there. And I can't remember, were you, yeah, sorry, maybe go back one just so I can see what that guy, there we go, okay. So the initial and ongoing training, that is a riddle, and what we use, and I think that's what Las Vegas used too, Dr. O'Flaherty, right?
Yes.
Okay, so she is this, interestingly enough, this all came out of the airline industry, I don't know if y'all knew that, but they had some really, really tragic airline accidents. One of them actually was right where you're going to be flying into next week. It was anyway, not to bore anybody with the history, but downed aircraft and all of the carnage, and that was really a start to critical incident stress management. And so we all got this training from this really, really interesting lady, Joanne O'Flaherty, I think is her name. But anyway, everybody got the same training. And it was all critical incident stress management, but there was a broadening, at least at Clark County, where now, and I really think that it's much broader now, and I know Bob and I have talked about it, and he can share some of his perspectives, but it was really just about finding people that care about first responders, and can you help us with this situation? And that was an advent to the supervisor training. We had a lot of struggle with captains. We wanted to be systematic about it. And so we wanted to give the captains a tool in order to use so they could start kind of the process, right? We needed to give them some training. This wasn't critical incident stress management training. It really wasn't peer support training. It really was just, I don't want to call it empathy training, but it was kind of an early recognition. And what we did is one of the guys who was he happens to be a deputy chief now, he wasn't at the time, his wife was in this kind of zone, right? And he knew that she would have a willingness. Clearly she loves first responders. And she put together some training, and then we gave it to all the captains. And then what happened through our SOP is we built an SOP. This is going to sound really, really kind of convoluted. We did an SOP and discussed the TIAAD, traumatic incident after action discussion. We were really careful with our words, right? We didn't want to do the debriefing. We didn't want to do the diffusing because in Clark County specifically, schism was kind of a thing. So we were trying to soften this. We were trying to market it. We were trying to use words with it, right? And so what happened is they have this training here. If they fell into a category where there was a traumatic incident, then they, as captains now, could give this discussion, and then they could survey the land to either deploy peer support or not to. And that was part of the kind of the experience in Clark County specifically. And it is, I'm going to call it Democrat or Republican. That's what I'm going to call it. Auto launch or not auto launch. It's very, very sensitive, and it still feels like a 50-50 ball. What's your experience been? Auto launched, peer support, not?
Let me hear. Let's get some crowd
Okay.
some crowd input on that. Where are you at today? We'll start with Bozeman. Where did you land in terms of when?
So I would say we're still struggling with that. I mean, context, right?
That's why I pushed it to you, because so am I.
So our peer support it's Gary and I and probably 4 other people, but
Yep.
basically the way you launch peer support in our department is you call one of us and then we either come or somebody on our team, we deploy them. And so the challenge for us really is how do we get, because a lot of times, right, it's the captains who are shitty captains who are creating bad environments for their people who are having more struggles. They're not going to be the ones they're the ones that think they can handle it, or the ones that don't even notice that it needs to be handled. So how do we, and that, I was asking a question, I don't remember who it was, the guy yesterday, talking about some of the same stuff, is just how do you use certain call types that forces a battalion chief to make a phone call and say, do you need peer support? And at least say yes or no. Because really that's, if I walk away with a better way of making it happen for our department from this, that's what I want.
So let me give a quick. That's exactly what we did. That traumatic incident after action discussion. We defined what traumatic incident looks like. Anything with a kid, this, that, and the other thing. Boom. You are required to have a discussion with your people. You are required then to report up, right? So then there is an acknowledgement. There is, hey, did you give the peer support? You know, all those things. Okay, now I'm saying this quickly, and I want to put this out there because I'm going to tell you that it's still not totally successful. And Bob's going to have his own opinion on it, but my opinion is this, and a little bit of disclaimer. In I did my doctoral work on suicidality, police officers, and firefighters. Stigma is real. It's about as real as it gets. It's as real as that chair. And the bottom line is this. People say they're good. They're going to continue to say that they're good. They're going to say they're good until they're not good, and they're either off the job or, God forbid, they take their own life. And so my opinion is we are not capable of making that decision. Not because we're not good people, not because we're not smart, because the external forces are so strong that prevent people from saying, yes, it is a good idea if peer support comes. So my personal opinion is you do need to put them out there. But the problem is there is also a group of people that doesn't work for. So there isn't a one size fits all. My personal opinion is that's a better approach. You would get more people, but it's highly, highly sensitive and highly, highly controversial.
Yes. My ideal model is that a supervisor or an officer, because I wrestle with what you described, because the problem lives in shitty officers that aren't engaging the process appropriately. And I look back to one of my captains. I had a significant event in my life. It wasn't a call. So it wouldn't have been triggered by a CAD dispatch type of thing. But my officer, he was solid, and he recognized that this is a pretty big event, and it's probably going to impact Bob. So he created space for. At the time, there was no peer support, but the prior crisis intervention administrator just called her and said, this went on. Bob's got this going on. It'd be nice if you come by the fire station. And she was brilliant at it. And people who are trained in this are generally brilliant at it. You show up at the fire station, appears as random as the day, just because she does that routinely, would come by stations to say hi, have some coffee. And before you know it, I've been whisked off to the side, unbeknownst to anybody, just for a check-in, and space was created for me to be able to communicate how I was feeling or dealing with it. And it was none of it was thrown on me. If you've been through counseling like that, to me, that was this is now me, stepping into in front of a clinician to say I have a problem. Like, that was the hardest 10 digits I've ever dialed on my phone, because I was so afraid. I didn't know what this was. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm going to walk in this. I'm like, stigma. I park in the parking lot. I've got my binoculars out to see who might see me. I mean, it was mortifying. Today, I dance all the way into the counselor's office because I'm like, you have to listen to me, bitch, for an hour, right? I have 2 counselors because I need a second opinion on some of my craziness now. But at the time, that's not how I felt walking in the door for like a clinical experience. Mm-hmm. So I say all that because I like to hope that we're moving the needle. Where I struggled with it from a managing the program standpoint is this sort of forcing it in a way. Because what I have for I gave you an example of an officer I think really handled it well, and in the perfect world, that's what it is. How do we create space and bring the team in? And if it doesn't land, or nobody needs it, or you can just kind of get a read. Here's how you reach me later. I'm going to call you in a couple days. We're going to see if your behavior is changing, if you're having these unusual characteristics. That's not what happens. A captain says, you have to go see a counselor, that kind of thing. Or peer support's coming, you will, talk to them. In terms of CISM, where I think and I'm curious if you have different expertise, because I don't track this as closely these days, so it's not my expertise. But the way I was trained and led to understand it is make attendance at a critical incident stress debriefing mandatory. Make participation optional. Right. You don't have to participate, but you need to be in the room.
That's right.
And the purpose, as I understood that, is then at least, it wasn't Bob needs help, Jeff doesn't, he didn't come, right? And so now that I feel like people are going to judge me, I'm not going to go either, even though I want the help. Right. And the idea is Jeff and Bob are both going to be in the room and participate if they. And most of the time when I've seen this done, people they open up and participate because the process is share. You have what I discovered on real significant. We had one recently. I thought it was brilliantly handled by our team of we have a team of clinicians and a team of peer support and a team of chaplains. Very well received in our system because we have to approach this regionally. We're too small to be able to manage this on our own. We have a great chaplain program. And so we had a real sad event of a young 7-year-old boy died in a river or in a stream. There had to be 70 people trying to find this boy, and the rescue is really, really bad stuff. So you fill a room like this with chairs, and everyone's got a piece of the puzzle. You need to hear what I was thinking or what I saw, to close the loop, as I understand it. So that's just an example of saying, here it is. I say mandatory. If somebody didn't come in off duty, it's not like they were disciplined because they didn't show up to that. I don't know if any of this is helping. It's therapeutic for me to kind of talk through how we're trying to approach it because it's really complicated, it seems to me.
Yeah, I would just come back because I hope you do get a little bit of closure. The specific advice I would lend is potentially reach out into your circles to see first, is there some captain level training that someone has passion for helping first responders that could put together? Something simple. Again, you don't want this to be clinician-y, you want it to be about being thoughtful and just hearing people out, but starting the dialogue, right? To get that training together and give it to the company officers specifically. You want to define those calls that some people say it's no big deal, but we all know that it's a big deal for many people, not all. This is not everybody all the time. They're not all these superlatives, right? So I think that those 2 pieces. And then what I think is the best approach is what exactly Bob said, is coming up with an automatic deployment of certain calls, but you don't have to participate. My experience has been the same, that people will not strangely, they want to talk too. But the stigma is absolutely real, and the evidence is just so overwhelming that people don't want to stick out. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead, please.
Well, when you're referring to specific incidents, what about the kind of like
Cumulative?
cumulative
Sure.
long-term, someone starting to deteriorate
Yeah.
in the workplace? What are the mechanisms in that situation?
So I would say that they're the same. When you arm captains the captains are the most critical component to any fire department. Bob and I share this. You are the 100% strongest influencers in any fire organization. So, technically speaking, you should know your people. That's one of their jobs, right? And so, to that, even if there was a cumulative amount, I think that that's where you can, if you don't, this is where it gets a little sticky. If you don't have your own behavioral health administrator, which not every organization does, you could look to peer support. You could look to the union, because usually the union has access to BHO programs, right? That also can be a little tricky, though, and I gather that. But I think the easiest answer to kind of come back to what you're saying is if you notice if you give some training to the company officers first, some kind of high-level warning signs. Jeff is coming in every single day, unkempt, disheveled, like and talking about how he killed a 12-pack last night, right? I'm just making stuff up. If you're seeing things that, if you're getting these high-level indicators, then you can start the conversation, man. You ain't a clinician, but you could start it, and then you could start guiding in the right way, because yes, cumulative is a real deal. It happens over time. It's not just the Route 91s. And we do talk about this, and I'm definitely going off the rails a little bit, but most states, there's still a few states out there that don't have enabling legislation for psychological injuries, but most of them that do are focused at mass casualty incidents, right? I went to Route 91. I was in the stage. I was in there with all the decedents, okay? I'm not proud of this, but what I'm going to tell you is I don't feel like I'm haunted because they weren't kids. If they were kids, this dude would be a train wreck. I can promise you that. But what's my point? The MCI, for me, that's not the thing I think about in my career as much. I think about the children related. So it's different for everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I think you need training, and I think that you give that's part of the training. We want you also to be able to identify not just after a particular incident, but what cumulative effects could be, like sleeplessness, alcohol, other dependencies, marriage going in the tank, whatever. And so I think that's a way to tackle that. Did you want to provide some perspective here? Yeah, please do.
We've always been trained. Attendance is voluntary.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about, like for me, maybe the solution for us is anytime there's a CISD that is requested by a firefighter, because it can be anybody.
Yep.
What I'm at least contemplating is maybe it's mandatory for the captain involved, the officer involved, because those are the guys that if they go to the firefighter and like, hey, are you going? I'm not going. It's not happening. But if they have to go, then the firefighter's like, oh, I'll just go, and they can go. That officer can go. No one has to participate. But I don't know if that's a good middle ground.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's where we tried to land. There's not a good relationship between labor and management at the time that this was all going on. So there's this lot of tension that if management developed a policy that says it's mandatory, that there would be an epic pushback. Not at the time of the event, just as that's the policy. Like we navigated past that because this was the request it was a labor-driven peer support program. For the reasons that I described, is we have to set the pace and make sure people are there, but don't have to participate. I don't know if that's still the current standard, I guess, or that's being pushed. Like when we saw it normalized better, and it took time to normalize, there wasn't as much pushback. Now you start to see some of the curmudgeon officers are turning over, new ones come in. They're kind of grew up in the fire service where the culture is now different. Like I said, I hope. in most places where it's much more acceptable. The clinical piece is now much more accepted than it was when we started the program in Las Vegas. When Jeff was the chief of Las Vegas, he was able to bring in somebody with a clinical background that had more acceptance than when we put out that survey, what we probably would have had. We have clinicians in Southern Oregon that are widely respected and partner with the chaplain program, and then there's some, like you said, about 5 or so, I think, in your program. So we have about that same amount, but supplemented by the rest of these professionals and police department. Everyone contributes to a regional peer support program instead of each agency having their own, and that seems to have been well accepted. That's a tricky part. Back to when we put this program together, it was how do we train them? Who's getting paid? How do they get paid, right? Do they come in from off duty to do that? Or, you're riding rescue downtown ambulance and put that rescue out of service and send them out to the Northwest because there was a critical event? I didn't think that was a good model, right? We didn't know how to do it. And I don't know where it is now, but I think we left at there was off duty, which from a bargaining group standpoint kind of became is there a standby on call for a peer support team? What's that look like? You can see how it could get and you may be experiencing that. It's challenging to figure out the right.
There's no doubt, but let me give you a couple suggestions. One, I would just say, outsider's perspective, knowing this much about your agency, if you're not doing it, because I thought I heard you say there's only 5 of you doing it.
Well, there's maybe 5 or 6, but there are others that aren't officially on their team that are doing incredible
Okay.
work.
Okay, because I was reach out to your retarees.
That's good.
Okay, cool.
That are doing that type of stuff, but aren't officially on the team.
Okay, so that's cool. I was gonna say you all need some help, right? And I would just offer the retirees as a possibility. But I want to get back to where I like where your head's at, and here's where I've found some value throughout my professional career, not just in the fire service. Life is trial and error. It's a game of, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. Let's try it. 90 days, 120 days, make it up. You could do a baseline first because you could set it up where, hey, this is what we're thinking, everybody. We're not sure about having captains at least do it for those reasons that you said. You put it in your words, but we want to do a little baseline first. So for the first 120 days, starting now, unless you already have this data, I don't know, you're going to say, we're going to see, how many, we need to know how many times the peer support goes out, right? And let's say it's 1. I'm making this up. Okay, well, 120 days from now, we're going to try having the captain sit in on all of these and look and see if there's a change. And then you can let the stakeholders, the people that are involved, say, actually, it did kind of work better this way. We got more peer support deployments or whatever it is. We did it this way for a baseline. Do you see what I'm saying? That was one of the things that we were doing in Clark County because we had a really thoughtful captain. Really love this dude. But he really felt like having auto deployments was going to do damage. And so the suggestion was, okay, we got the traumatic incident after action discussion. You're going to give these. Let's look at it. And what they found there, and what I think most people find, is that they just don't get the involvement because of stigma. The stigma is just a wicked barrier. And I appreciate, you want people to come to their own conclusions. I fully believe that. But at the same time, this one is difficult, and it really, I really, again, through my experience and through my research, I think that the greater good happens when there's a little bit more of, you really do need to have, you don't have to go and necessarily get a professional on your own and have one-on-ones. That's not what I'm saying. But just having something, someone, you have to have someone to offload. And we probably talk about this for 2 hours. I need to share this quick story. I used to come, it was once in a while. I never talk about work. Every once in a while I'd have a call, usually a kid call, that I was like, oh man, this sucks. And I'd come home and I'd talk to my wife, right? And we had kids at the time, and I needed to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody. So I'd be telling her, I'd be like, whatever, what a crappy call, use your imagination. And she'd be like doing that, she'd be like, I couldn't even get her in one, I'm like, can you listen to me for a second? It was JJ this, which is one of my sons, it was Trinity that. I'm like, I need you for one, and then I just get pissed. And I go to the gym. And I did that however many times, and I got pissed. And then I finally had this selfish, illuminating moment given to me by my wife that she said, because I finally blew it. I was like, I need you to listen to me. What do you think she said? I can't listen to you. I can't hear that shit. I can't hear that. I don't have the equipment for that, right? I was going to the wrong spot. And I didn't even realize it. I thought it was about me. I was like, hey, you got to listen to me, right? Not everybody can do that. So my whole point to that, you got to have some way to offload it. It could be with other firefighters. It could be through peer support. It could be through a professional. Whatever it is, it's different strokes for different folks. That's cool. But most people do need something. And that's where I come back to. And a lot of times having a peer support, it's a great option because they look like you, they sound like you, they're in the same game that you are. So I know I got a little bit off the rails there, but just want to provide some perspective. So trial and error, that's what I would suggest, trial and error.
We're about to run out of time. We're at like 8
Yeah.
minutes or so, so we'll get through the rest of the board.
Right.
But I want to pin one more thing on this, and that's we did get into the CAD system, used a notification system we did, and built a fairly elaborate algorithm to alert the peer support team to certain events. And we were able to build it in pediatric trauma, motor vehicle collision with multiple fatalities. Like we built this really elaborate notification system that triggered the team to have an awareness, and then the team would call the officer, say, man, that sounds like you guys had a sucky call. Just even by phone, talk with the officer and make a judgment of whether it would be appropriate to deploy. Some of what we tried to capture is cumulative. This paramedic worked 3 days in a row and had a PD code every day of that. And this system was able to get into report writing and be able to ascertain that and set up an alert that said, hey, paramedic so-and-so has had, events. It's not perfect, but it was better than anything we had then. So, we can talk about some ideas on how to just raise awareness to the right people and then figure out how to engage. And then, what we started to see over time now, because that program's been in place for 8 years, it got tested, it's been supported, is it continues to be iterative as the organization matures and grows and new people come in. One of the things we did, we had a peer fitness team and a peer support team, and we knew our ability to scale a workforce of 700 people was impossible. And so we focused in 2 particular areas when it came to providing support to our workforce outside the critical incident stuff we just talked about. One was recruits, the brand new people that were coming in the door, and then those near retirement who are about to go out the door, because that is a critical incident in and of itself. Are a lot of folks who are going to retire and don't have a plan to retire, and so they go from this high vigilance sense to no identity anymore, and they struggle with that. So we assigned our peer support, a peer fitness. So when you graduated Recruit Academy and got your badge pinned on your chest, you got an envelope. And in your envelope was your station assignment, the captain you were going to go work for, your peer support team member, and your peer fitness trainer, who were all at the academy, or at the graduation of the academy, and met their families, and would just check in routinely. And that was part of our attempt to normalize. They don't know any better. They're probation. This is wonderful. They don't know who so-and-so is. And start to develop and establish relationships with people that we felt like would carry through the career. I don't know if that was effective. We didn't measure that later, and I left, and I don't know. So, but those were ways we were trying to approach with a small team. How can we have an impact in a way that we thought would start to normalize a culture of acceptance in being okay to not be okay?
Yeah.
you want to hit on this piece? Because I
Yeah.
do want to hear a little
bit
bit.
about
So
91.
after Route 91, I had already left and moved to Oregon. I moved to Oregon in May of 17, and then the event occurred in October. And so Jeff was on the ground, and I just want to hear a little bit about that, and then
Sure.
we'll have some questions.
Sure. The whole theme here is it's got to start when they start as recruits, and it's got to be driven through your entire organization. And the way that you really put your stamp on it, put it in your OCS school, officer candidate school, put it in your promotional process, make it be one of the scenarios, right? That's where you can be actionable. Talk is cheap. Talk is absolutely cheap. It's your actions, it's your behaviors that really decide who you are as a person and what's important to you. You can say all day long you're a family person, but if you're never at home, are you really a family person? Yeah.
I see that as part of the problem.
Yeah.
For sure, exactly what you're saying. Our peer support team was called to be part of our officer leadership class.
Uh-huh.
And we brought that and tried to suggest, can you not only define your values, which would be one thing, right? How many can define their own values, but how many are actually living them?
That's right.
I see that as a huge problem.
Yeah. I totally agree, right? I totally agree. I don't have the answer. I don't have the magic bullet for you. We just talked about this. That's why I say talk is cheap, right? The reality is what you do and what you say, they got to align. And a lot of people don't do it. I ain't judging, right? But it is absolutely a challenge. Organizationally, though, you can hold the organization to it. And that's how you do it. You put it in recruit school, you put it in your leadership training, you put it in your promotional process, you do it in a monthly whatever. Now you have actions to say, okay, you can tie it back. That is a value for Bozeman Fire. That is a value for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. And those are some of the things that you can do. Another thing that we did, it may seem symbolic, but it's not. The behavioral health administrator reported directly to the fire chief. Why? Because there are obstacles. When that didn't happen before, that was a recommendation given to me by the outgoing crisis administrator. You know, she had given me, I was like, I'm all over it. I totally get it. Because there's plenty of BCs and captains that say the company line, but they don't do it, right? Not saying they're bad people, but they don't see the importance or whatever. And so that's another thing that you can do. You can elevate so you have better alignment to remove kind of friction and barriers. And I would be happy, and I know Bob would too. We'll put our emails up there, definitely available for ongoing conversations. I will share a little bit. I'll get into the Route 91. Just a little bit. I'll kind of paint the picture a little bit, and I'll tell you some of what happened that night and what's ongoing. So Route 91, I have a 17, 15-year-old and 4-year-old. I'll say that again. 17, 15, 4. It is all from the same, I've been married for 20 years, and I'm trying to stay married. And my wife had just found out that she was pregnant, and so I had my phone on silent. I had my phone on silent because I'm trying to stay married. And the fire chief had called me. My buddy who was a deputy chief had called me, my work phone. I didn't hear it. Then my buddy called my personal cell phone. And this is what I heard. Jeff, you got to get down here. This is like Mumbai. Anybody know about the Mumbai incident? I see all the head shaking. I'm like, okay. Boom. I get in the car. It is crazy, right? You're coming down Las Vegas Boulevard from the south heading north, and you see something you've never seen. And that is, as far as the eye can see, emergency vehicles on both sides, and it ain't moving. There's no traffic there. I check into the incident command post, which I had no business. I wasn't going to stay there. I already knew what I was going to do. I was coming down to where my buddy was on the east side of the stage, right? So I check in incident command. I'm there for a hot minute. Then I go down the east side of the stage, and it's like the end of the world. And I mean that because I'm not trying to give in to hyperbole here, people. But the reality is there were shoes. There was purses. Who leaves their cell phone anywhere? Hundreds of cell phones. Hundreds of purses, shoes, you name it, body fluids. It was all out there. It looked like, holy moly, the end of the world just happened. So it was quite the sight. And so we were on the east side of the stage the whole night, and we wound up getting a rather crappy assignment to go in and pronounce the decedents dead. And this came from inside, from Metro Police. And then what happened was myself, because I was a paramedic at the time, right? I'm like, why are we going to give this crappy assignment to another group? I guess we'll take that crappy assignment. So we all decided to do that. We go in. We're teamed up with the CSI, Metro, so we go on these parties of 4. And now we're going through and calling the decedents. And then we're stopped by different crime bureaus. What are you guys doing? Well, we were called. We had this assignment. It's like, oh, no, we don't have to be in there. You don't have to tell me twice. We're all out of there. Hold that for just a couple minutes. We go through the rest of the night, which again, some of the things that we both dealt with and all the first responders, dealt with is just things that were just unusual and weird and impactful, not necessarily in a gruesome way, but in a moving way. For example, there was a guy, the toughest assignment I had that night was there was a dude standing over his wife who'd been shot and killed. She had a sheet on. I don't know, 35, maybe 36. He was just standing there for hours and hours and hours because we couldn't give him any information. As you can imagine, what's going to happen next? Well, my crappy assignment came when the sheriff said came out through, incident command. We need everybody, all family, loved ones, friends of decedents to go to Metro headquarters so they can give details and they can provide information. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know what I would do. I know what I wouldn't do if someone was going to ask me to leave my dead wife. That shit ain't happening, right? So I walk up, kind of like this. I'm like, hey man, I don't even know how to say this, but the sheriff really would like if you could go to this other location that's about 8 miles away and wait there so you could provide some details about this. And I probably said under my breath, because I'm also trying to be a professional. I'm also trying to adhere to the mission at the time through the command. I'm pretty sure I said, I think I already know what the answer is because I think I would say the same thing. He's like, I ain't leaving nowhere. And I'm like, boom, I got it. But it was something like that. These are the things that personally were impactful for me. A good friend of mine who also was in with the decedents, he had a very, very moving experience with one of the decedents, and it's lasting with him, and he's getting professional help. But let's fast forward through all that and get to the end and another difficult decision we had to make. People had been on that scene for 8-9 hours, and we had to make a call. Are we going to bring them in for peer support? It doesn't work for everybody. We just didn't know what to do, right? But what did we land on? What we landed on is everybody's going to come back to the training center, and we are going to say thank you, we love you, appreciate everything that you did. Here are the resources that are here. We assembled resources, we gave options, and we gave about a 15 or a 20-minute kind of set the stage, right? And then from there, the IAFF mobilized. We had trainers come in from the IAFF. It was awesome. It was really this all hands on deck. And Bob already mentioned it. There were already things that Clark County had done, Las Vegas had done. It was a regional-wide effort, and it's still ongoing today. I'm still a part of the resiliency group. I mean, it was goat yoga. I mean, it was counselors. It was literally, you name it, that is what was and still is being provided. How much interaction do you think? How many people were using it? Not much. Not much. Why? I think it's stigma. I don't know that we're going to know the actual impacts of Route 91, just like FDNY, just like the towers, 10 years later, right? It's kind of that. I don't know that to be the case, but that's what my gut instinct tells me. But the efforts that we put forward, it was round-the-clock peer support. It was just this all hands on deck. It was this funded and assembled group called the Resiliency Group. And it was brainstorming, constant brainstorming. I heard about this goat yoga thing. Okay, boom, try it. I heard about this. I heard about meditation this. I heard about massage at the station. I mean, anything you can think of is what was being done, and I'm sure that was being done now. The crazy thing is you can't make people do it. You know that they're struggling out there. There were 75 or 77 Clark County firefighters on that scene, hundreds of police officers. I mean, wide ranges of employees were on that scene. Like I say, you had executive officers on that scene as well. So there was a lot of people that were struggling. My boss, who's just a great human being, he put out one of the most impactful, and we're past time here, one of the most impactful emails I think you can do in a leadership role. And he said, he was talking about himself, it's okay not to be okay. So it's a top-down, from that standpoint. And so a little bit of context, what we did at Route 91, assembling people, providing them with those resources, ongoing check-ins, get with IAFF, and just be creative as best you can and try to be persistent. Try to be persistent because you might not get the involvement and the interaction if you have to go through an experience like that. So we went 5 minutes over. Thank you for staying here. You always have choices. Food's on the table. I got it. We're at the end of the conference, so definitely really appreciate y'all listening and engaging. That was really cool.
We'll stick around for questions afterwards, but you're free to go. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thanks for coming to our session.